Hi, this is Bob Samuels, founder of TechConnectr. TechConnectr provides efficiencies and actionable intelligence to B2B lead gen marketers and their agents. We have partnered with Serious Decisions to bring you wisdom from leading account-based marketing thought leaders. To that end, I would like to introduce you to Nicky Briggs, Research Director at Forrester. Nicky is a featured speaker and the host of the ABM and Demand Gen sessions at the Serious Decisions Summit in London. Nicky, it is a pleasure to speak with you. How are you today?
Great to speak to you, Bob. I'm doing well, thank you.
Outstanding. Well, I'm looking forward to coming out to London. I assume that it's wet and cold and yucky.
Not too bad today, but please don't bring the weather with you.
I don't think I'd recognize it otherwise. It's a great place, and it's delightful. So I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for your time. If you could give a little bit of background of you in marketing and ABM in particular, that would be helpful.
Yes, of course, Bob. So, a bit of my background is I'm a research director specializing in account based marketing here at Serious Decisions. I joined the company just over 3 years ago now, but like all of the analysts, I'm a former practitioner myself. So, my background is I've spent around 20 years of my career in B2B technology marketing, primarily at large systems integrations companies. And I started specializing in account based marketing way back in 2007, so long before it became the hot topic it is today. And I set up an ABM practice at one of the large systems integrators, Logica, which is now part of the CGI group. And then more recently, I was at a company called Avanade, which is an Accenture Microsoft joint venture. And I set up their ABM program for them and established a global center of expertise before joining Serious Decisions 3 years ago. So that's a bit about me.
Excellent. So it's great. It's great you all have a experience actually doing the work as opposed to being the expert. So I think it's wonderful. So
Yeah.
account-based marketing. It's a lot of things to lots of people. How do you see account-based marketing on a very large 3,000-foot level view?
Yeah, well, at the 3,000 foot level view, it's really about recognizing that, to an organization, not all accounts are going to be created equally, that some accounts are going to be more valuable to you than others. And once you've understood that, it's about recognizing, well, therefore, we're not going to treat them the same way. And so it involves an investment in deeper insight gathering, in working with the sales in a more involved way, and in developing very customized approaches into these accounts, amongst other things. So that's the sort of the 3,000 foot view. It is worth noting that there are different deployment types of ABM that we see in the market. And, going back sort of 10, 15 years to when I started out, that there was only one ABM type, which was the one-to-one type of ABM, which is very much focused at your largest, most strategic accounts. And the problem was that didn't scale very well. And what we've seen more and more of in recent years, particularly I would say in the last sort of 6 to 7 years, is the emergence of various technologies to allow the delivery of ABM at scale, which is really what's allowed more companies to think about the applicability of ABM to their scenarios. And we're seeing it deployed, to net new logo accounts nowadays, whereas in the olden days that would be quite a rare context. So yeah, it's changed a lot in recent years, and there's definitely been a blurring of the lines in terms of how ABM is defined and where ABM stops and demand creation starts.
Wonderful. And so there's valuable accounts, there's super valuable ones where they're worthy of your one-on-one relationship, and then there's pretty worthy still as a next level, and then others, I guess.
Yeah, and you might have your demand creation colleagues perhaps focusing on the long tail of accounts that maybe are less likely to convert, for example. But ABM and demand strategies can be highly, highly complementary.
Beautiful. And so, what have you've? I'm sure you've seen some outstanding examples of ABM implementations, and some learning opportunities. Do you have any that you can share?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think some of the examples that are front of mind for me are from some of the practitioners that have made that switch from delivering one-to-one ABM into a more scalable type of approach. And we will see different strategies for doing that. I mean, one example that's very front of mind for me, and this is a program that we awarded our ROI award a couple of years ago. And it comes from DXC, which are a technology company. They've worked with us for over 5 years, and it's widely regarded as, a real shining example of best practice ABM. And one of the things that they did to address that scale issue was to think about how they could scale out ABM support in a way that was where the growth was coming from in these key accounts. And for them, that meant moving to what they called a pursuit marketing approach, or focusing on very large deals. So it's really getting laser focused in your account based marketing.
Hmm.
Another
Hmm.
example, which, and this comes with a slight spoiler alert, but we're going to be awarding them the Program of the Year at our EMEA Summit. And this is SAP, who've done a really, really good job of scaling their content so that they can cover more accounts in an account based approach. So there's a couple of examples there of companies that are doing it really well.
Oh my! So my sound cut off in the beginning. So the SAP was the second one you mentioned, and the first company, the
DXC.
DXing. Very good. Wow, that's great. And so when you see success, what do you attribute it to? I mean, there's the planning and the coordination phase between sales and marketing. There's the segmentation and the messaging and the where do what's the most important? Where do you see where companies either make or break it if they do it right, or if they don't?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And being a research an advisory company, we spend a lot of our lives sort of digging into the data to understand what makes those high performers stand out. And it was a topic we looked into quite recently, and we identified a group at like the top quartile performers, so the people that were getting the very, very best ROI from their ABM programs. And we kind of retrofitted that against some of the things that they were doing to understand what they were doing differently. And what was really striking was, they weren't, the tactics they were using weren't different. They were using the exact same tactics as everyone else. But a few things that were striking were, firstly, in the way that they were set up. And these programs had been set up to be successful right out of the gate. So they had slightly higher budgets than the others. Um, they weren't trying to do things on a shoestring. They were committed
Hmm.
to doing this. They were more likely to have executive sponsorship in place on both the sales and the marketing leadership side, and they were far more likely to have a dedicated leader. Some of the ABM programs that struggle a bit more, maybe it's sort of somebody who's been asked to fit in ABM alongside four other day jobs that they've got. They've not been given the budget to set themselves up for success, and leadership aren't really as hands on. So that was one particularly striking finding. Um, I'll just give you two others. There are actually five areas we honed in on, but I'll focus on just three for brevity's sake. What was striking was that they were three times more likely to customize content for their ABM approaches. And so it understandably followed that the accounts were more engaged, the engagement was with the right people at the right time, and ultimately those accounts were more likely to convert. So that was quite a striking finding. And I think another one was just in the way that they were measuring, and they were far, far more likely to track revenue-based metrics associated with their programs. The lower performers, they might be dining out too much on, a good word from a seller. And in this day and age, in B2B circles, we do really need to have robust measurement if we want our programs to survive and thrive in the long term. So that would just be a brief snapshot of some of what the high performers are doing differently.
Wow, that's beautiful. The what you measure is so important. I mean, I don't know if you know Matt Hines, but one of the favorite
Yes.
lines he said was, "If you can't buy a beer with it, the metric's no good. Revenue you can buy, you can buy a lot of beer with that. See, leads not so much."
Indeed,
So,
indeed.
indeed. So that's really wonderful. So uh, you mentioned customizing content, and I also it seems that the super valuable prospects deserve the best one-on-one customization as much as possible. The next level down deserves some customization, but different degrees of customization, and then maybe there's another level down there where it's more somewhat customized, but fairly general. So where do you draw the line, and how customized does one person need to get? I mean, more than just hey, dear first name or whatever.
Yeah, and one of the presentations we're going to be doing at Summit talks about this exact issue. And, really one of the big features of how customized you're able to go is actually a byproduct of the insights that you've got on the account. Because, if you think about it, if you don't know that much about them, you're really not going to be able to get too down in the weeds and too highly customized. So we define these different levels ranging from the lower levels where maybe you've got fairly basic account firmographic information that you can work with. Maybe you understand a little bit about the buying group, like you might understand what their needs are and some of the personas that make up that buying group and where they go to for information and things like that. But we're not talking about super rich insights here, so that
Mm-hmm.
is going to pose some constraints on what it is you're able to do. At the higher touch end, this is when, and we will tend to see this in large one-to-one ABM programs, usually very large accounts, typically existing accounts, because one of the important things here is where there is a lot of content customization going on, it is quite resource intensive for the marketers. And that's why it will commonly be the preserve of those very, very large accounts, because you don't want the marketers to be spending more time on the accounts than the sellers. So it is
Mm-hmm.
about striking that balance and getting the right level based on the number of accounts in your program and the insights that you've got.
Good. So you also mentioned engaging the prospects, the right people, and at the right time. And so I assume there's some intelligence gathering going on where trying to listen to signals, perhaps of what the timing might be. Is that a little secret or a little uh, tool?
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. You've hit the nail on the head there. And, we talk about triggers. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to activate content based on when these accounts are likely to be in market. And, a lot of people, one of the big technology categories in ABM is intent monitoring, whether we're talking first party or third party intent monitoring. But actually, even if you're not going out and investing in some of those tools, by listening to those trigger events, you're still able to create some of that experience. So, a great example, one of the clients that I work with, they know that their accounts are far more likely to buy when they are in their Q4. So not the company's Q4, but the target account's Q4. And conceptually,
Mhm.
that makes sense to us all as B2B marketers. How many times have we tried to spend our budget going out of Q4 when we know that new budget is going to be released? And
Mhm.
so what they do, and they know their sales cycle is 6 months long. So they're timing all of their marketing campaigns to go live around about the Q2, so that it's supporting that buying process at exactly the point when they're ready to buy. So it goes to show, so long as you understand those trigger events, you don't necessarily need to go out and invest in intent monitoring, although a lot of people are using that type of technology very successfully in an account-based approach.
Yeah, makes sense. And but the key is to listen and to try to figure out when the timing's best. The nice thing about the intent monitoring or the signals monitoring is you also get to learn what to talk about. Maybe find what specifically are they researching about? What topic? What angle? Maybe there's some clues in that. So that's kind of fun. There's lots of cool technology out there, huh?
There sure is.
And data, and that's data is king often. So there's a lot of interesting uh, technology out there, a lot of interesting data. What kind of data do you like to look at to be able to get the targeting and the timing and the who the right people, who, what, where, when, why of the campaign? What's your ideal data?
Yeah, so there are some basic data points that would be absolute givens in an ABM approach. And some of these are pretty basic stuff that apply to all marketers. We're talking basic firmographics, understanding the name of the companies, what industries they're in, where they're based. We need to know a little bit about some of the industry trends that would be important as well. um, thinking about your buying group, we need to recognize in the ABM world that leads don't sign opportunities. Ultimately, opportunities come down to the buying group, which is why we introduced the demand unit waterfall a couple of years ago. And that's particularly relevant in an ABM setting. So you need to understand a bit about your buying group. Who are some of the personas that make up that buying group, what their need is, where they go for information. And particularly, as we were saying earlier, understanding some of those important trigger events that tell you when they're more likely to be in market. So if you understand those basics, you're good to go. Like you can get some form of an ABM program off the ground. Now, obviously, as you move up the pyramid and more into a one-to-one approach, your insights are going to run a lot deeper. For instance, you're going to have an account plan that you can work with. You'll understand a bit about the competitive landscape. You'll understand customer feedback, some of the value outcomes that you've delivered. So your insights will run a lot deeper. But don't what I would encourage people to think about is you don't need to know every single last detail about this account in order to get some form of ABM off the ground. So long as you're covering the minimal bases, any additional insights beyond that, the most important thing is that they're connecting into an action. You're not gathering these insights for the good of your health. So you might, for example, I'll give you a real life example. I was talking to a healthcare company the other day, and for them, a really, really critical insight was knowing whether the companies that they were targeting had recently secured a clinical trial approval, because in that case, that was consistent with a higher likelihood to buy. So long as you understand those insights that will help you move the needle, there's no need to obsess about knowing every last detail.
That's good advice. Absolutely. And then as far as channels of outreach, how do you decide how to hit these people? Is it phone calls? Is it email? Is it website, social, billboards? How do you
We
decide how to hit people?
Yeah, we see a whole mix going on, and we're not talking about a secret set of tactics that only ABMers get to know and use. They're using the exact same tactics as everyone else. What the ABMers are doing differently is that they're constantly connecting these tactics back to the goals of the account. So, for instance, let's just say that you've got a goal around getting into a whole new buying center, and that buying center never heard of you before, hasn't associated your company name with that category or that solution to their problem. So oftentimes in those instances, we'll see the ABMers focusing more on some of the top of funnel type of tactics, thought leadership type of things. We'll see a lot of account targeted display, some of these activities that we know play well early on in the buying cycle. Equally, you might have a goal around accelerating pipeline, maybe even right down to a single very, very large opportunity. And there, the ABMers will have the wisdom and expertise to understand how a different set of tactics might play better later on in that buying journey. But whenever you're choosing tactics, you're always wanting to relate it back to the goal for the account or indeed the group of accounts.
Smart. It's often forgotten. So, you've seen a lot of changes in the past several years. What do you see going forward? What will we be talking about at next year's conference or in 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. And it's funny actually. A couple of months ago, we spent some time talking about some of the very big picture trends that are impacting the B2B landscape at large. So not just ABM; these are trends that impact anyone, and these are
Hmm.
things like artificial intelligence. The need for authenticity. For example, so we recently saw Unilever make a declaration that they wouldn't be moving forward, with suppliers and brands that didn't support their sustainability goals, for example. So authenticity would be a big trend. Another one would be around the atomization of content, for instance, and how that supports personalization. Adaptability is another one we talked about. We're seeing a lot more companies thinking about how they can embrace agile approaches to their B2B marketing. So those are kind of some of those macro trends that are going on, and some of them are more applicable to ABM than others. I mean, particularly AI, particularly that atomization trend. So that's kind of 5 years out. And then what we try and do as a research and advisory company is to then think, well, if that's what the future could look like in 5 years' time, what does it mean for next year?
Hmm.
So, to take artificial intelligence, for instance, well, you're not going to be in a great position to embrace some of the promise of artificial intelligence in your ABM programs if your data's in bad shape, for example. So, if you feel like that trend is one that you're interested in going after, a good next step for next year might be to make sure that your data layer is in good place, for example. So in our planning assumptions, we published planning assumptions round about this time every year. We've got a webcast people can listen into on demand if they want to dig deeper into that topic. But it does take those bigger picture trends, but then say, right, now what do you need to do next year?
Hmm. Terrific. Good stuff. So I look forward to seeing you at the Serious Decisions event this week, Thursday. Wow.
Yes, indeed. Look forward to seeing you here.
And your presentations on what and which day?
My presentation is on hyper personalization in the B2B world. And this
Wonderful.
actually isn't necessarily an ABM specific uh, topic. This is something that's relevant to all B2B marketers, and particularly the folks that have to worry about the content. But we do draw examples from the ABM world because obviously, as ABMers, we've had to be early adopters of this trend. We were early to recognize the value that high customization can bring. So all of the examples that we're going to be using are drawn from the ABM world, which I'm really excited to share.
Outstanding. And hyper personalization and atomization of content, they're related or similar or same?
Yeah, exactly right. So the atomization of content describes how you can really modularize it and break it down into its constituent parts, which makes it a lot easier to be hyper personalized
Mm,
because it means that you can rip and replace discrete pieces of the content. So you're able to reuse content, but it makes for a very personalized and what looks like a very high touch buying experience.
wonderful. Good stuff, Nikki. I I could talk a while longer, but I need to let you go. Any other words of wisdom? Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you at the event.
I look forward to seeing you there too, Bob. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been great talking to you.
It's a pleasure, Nikki. Take care. Cut. Take care. Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Cut. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Nikki, this was really a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you. I think the other two people I interviewed offered to buy me a beer when I saw them. So,
I'm told that
or I
you.
can buy you one, or a coffee.
I try not to drink at Summit, but I'm sure we'll find time to have a coffee. And I'm told you're very easy to spot because you always wear a fedora.
Exactly. I'm a short little guy with a fedora, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you there. It's a pleasure,
Yeah,
Nikki.
we do swing by our stand because most of the analysts will usually hang out by the stand during the breaks, so it's a good
Excellent.
opportunity to run into
Well,
us.
I'm gonna go to your presentation. It's
Oh,
outstanding. I mean, that's I'm looking forward to that because
great
that's the
stuff.
tricky part to me, and no one really tells you how. I mean, the content's the hardest part. People don't really they gloss over it, and there's no system that can really help you.
Mm,
But to have some methodology, it's a good start.
yeah, yeah.
And modularization is a nice way to do it. It's a, so
Yeah.
anyway, I look forward to seeing your presentation.
Well, safe travels, Bob. I'm assuming you're not on UK soil at the moment, so I will wish you
No.
safe flight.
Yep, I leave tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you. Thank you, Nikki, again. Take care.
Bye bye. Bye.